When it comes to thinking of a franchise or trilogy of sorts that is groundbreaking, well crafted, immersive, and well consisted, you tend to think of the original Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, the original Harry Potters, but when it comes to something like that for anything past the early 2010s, nothing comes to mind really. But something that has come to the rise from 2021 with such a new film this year has to be Dune, which has once again given us such a new event to experience on the big screen. In these next two videos, I'll be talking about this new series in the making, while talking about both Part 1 and Part 2. Part 1 is a 2021 epic sci-fi film directed by Denis Villeneuve, who co-wrote the script with Jon Spaihts and Eric Roth. It is the first film of a planned trilogy adaptation of the 1965 novel with the same name created by Frank Herbert. This is the third adaptation of this book series, with the originals being David Lynch's 1984 film and John Harrison's 2000 TV series. And I do mean that just as an adaptation of the first book. I know there is other adaptations out there of the other books, but that's what I mean by that. Now, anyways, let's get into the plot. This is set in the distant future where rule of the planet Caladan, Duke Leto Atreides is assigned by the Emperor Shaddam IV to replace Baron Vladimir Harkon. And I will just say I'm probably butchering all these names, but I'm trying my hardest here. As the freeholder of Arrakis, which is a desert planet, and as the sole source of spice, which is a valuable substance that imparts heightened vitality and awareness. This is the key to interstellar travel, giving Space-Guard navigators the ability to guide starships to traverse instantaneously while being safe. The Shaddam secretly plots for Arrakeen to retake Arrakis and to destroy the Atreides family. Overall, Leto is suspicious of this, but starts to take on the challenge of controlling Arrakis while making an alliance with its mysterious natives, the Freemen. His wife, Lady Jessica, is a part of an exclusive sisterhood whose members possess advanced physical and mental capabilities. As a part of a centuries-long breeding program, they instruct her to have a daughter with a Harkon to become a super being with the clairvoyancy necessary to guide humanity to a better future. However, due to her love for Leto, she disobeys this tradition and has a son with him named Paul, who is trained by Leto's aides, who are Duncan Idaho, Gurney Halleck, the Suk Doctor Wellerton Yu, and the Mentor Hawata. Jessica also teaches him her sisterhood ways as well. He then begins to have visions of the future and tells both his mother and Duncan about them. The Reverend Mother and the Imperial Truthsayer then visits Paul. Due to his birth not being a part of their plan and is now an unpredictable element of it, she subjects him to a death alternative Gom Jabba test to assess his abilities, which he passes. After this, she then attends a secret meeting with Baron to spare both Jessica and Paul in his plan, which he agrees to do so. The Atreides family then arrive to Arrakeen, the fortress stronghold of Arrakis. Duncan's advance party then make contact with the Freemen, where the natives begin to respect both Jessica and Paul, which he explains is due to the sisterhood's beliefs on the planet centuries before. Leto begins to negotiate with their chieftain Stinglar, who meets with the Imperial Judge of the Change and Dr. Keen, who is the planet theologist who lives among them. Overall, they brief them on the dangers of spice harvesting and the giant sandworms which travel under the desert and make the use of protective Holtzman shields unwise. A fight then breaks out, but they end up saving a stranded spice harvesting crew from a sandworm, and Paul's exposure to the spice makes him sense something bad is soon to happen. After a failed assassination on Paul, Yu betrays the family and disables Arrakeen's shields, which allows for an invasion. He incapacitates Leo, where he plans to exchange him for his wife, who is in the Baron's prison. He then replaces one of his teeth with a poison gas capsule with which Leto could assassinate the Baron with. He is then double-crossed and killed by the Baron, and Leto releases the gas, which kills both of them and the Baron's mentor, but overall he survives. Even then, he also hasn't kept his promise and has planned for both Jessica and Paul to be dropped deep into the desert to die. However, in some compassion, Yu has then left them with a Frem kit with survival supplies. The mother uses a technique called the Voice to overpower and kill the captors. Both journey overnight in the desert, where Paul, now surrounded by spice, has visions of a bloody holy war fought across the universe in his own name. The Baron then gives command of the Arrakis to his nephew Rabban and orders him to restart spice production to recoup the costs of the invasion. The mother and son are then found by Duncan and Keynes, where Paul discloses his plans to marry one of Shaddam's daughters to avert the civil war, which could ensure him from news of the Emperor's treachery. They are then found, but Duncan sacrifices himself to enable Jessica and Paul to escape. Keynes is mortally wounded and then lures the Sandworm to devour her and the attackers. Alone in the deep desert, the mother and son then encounter Stinglar's tribe, which includes Shani, who is a girl who has appeared in many of Paul's visions. A warrior, Jamis, overall opposes his leader's lenience to them and challenges Paul to a ritual duel to the death, which Paul wins. Going against his mother's wishes, Paul joins the Freemen to fulfill his father's goals of bringing peace to Arrakis. Paul is played by Timithee Chalamet, Jessica is played by Rebecca Ferguson, Leto is played by Oscar Isaac, Gurney is played by Josh Brolin, Vladimir is played by Stellan Skarsgard, Rabban is played by Bautista, Keynes is played by Sharon Duncan-Brewster, Howard is played by McKinley Henderson, Chani is played by Zendaya, Hugh is played by Chang Chen, the Reverend Mother is played by Charlotte Rampling, Duncan is played by Jason Momoa, Stilgar is played by Javier Bardem, Pitter is played by David Dastmalchian, Jamis is played by Babs Olskamungun. Yeah, I've definitely pronounced that one wrong. Mapes is played by Golda Rochevaux, and the Herald of Change is played by Benjamin Clementine. Way back when Herbert released the original book in 1965, it was very evident that a film based on a novel could happen, where from 1971 the film's rights were held by several producers. Though as well they all pretty much agreed that parts of the book would be unfilmable, and since there were that many fans of the new book series, they felt that if they did make something that would also be disappointing, that things could have backfired. Filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky would then acquire the film's rights himself back in the 70s and planned to make a whopping 14-hour adaptation of the book, but the project failed to be made due to not gaining enough funds. Eventually in 1984, Lynch's film would finally be made and released. This itself was originally intended to be a 3-hour film, but was heavily cut down to be 2 hours and 17 minutes, then was poorly received, which even made the director even disowning it. Would then be producer Richard P. Rubinstein, who would then get the film rights in 1996, where he then produced the show, which was directed by John Harrison and Herbert himself. This aired on the Sci-Fi channel and was a hit ratings wise, with also being received better by fans compared to the original movie. Though critics did well critique the project for not being big enough to be a feature film, and that it also was too faithful to the book, with having too much exposition. After the success of book to film adaptations such as the mentioned Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter, Paramount Pictures would then gain the rights in 2008 and hire Peter Berg to direct his own adaptation. Though they would then leave this project in October 2009, with Peter Morrell taking over the role in January 2010. Though things would then not work out, with it being cancelled in March 2011 and the rights were then reverted back to Rubinstein. The same year, Mary Parent, the vice chair of production for Legendary Entertainment, and Kel Boyter, her producing partner, managed to get the rights. 5 years later, the actual company Legendary would then acquire them in November 2016. Variety would then report the next month that Denis was in the talks with the studio to direct the film, where he was even interested in doing a Dune film that September. His overall enthusiasm and respect from Parent. She would then call him and hire him after he described his vision to her. He would then choose to finish other films he was working on first, such as Arrival from 2016 and Blade Runner 2049 from 2017, as he wanted to spend more time developing the film and co-write it. He would then sign on to direct by January 2017, and the next month he was officially announced to be doing so. Previous collaborators from Arrival and 2049 returned to work in this film, including the editor Joe Walker, production designer Patrice Vermite, visual effects supervisor Paul Lambert, sound designer Theo Green, sound editor Mark Mangrini, and special effects supervisor Gerd Nufza. Others that attended to work on the film but dropped out are visual effects supervisor Greg Nelson and cinematographer Roger Deakins. Game of Thrones language creator David G. Peterson was confirmed to be developing the languages for this film in April 2019. His goal was to adapt the novel into 2 films, and in March 2018 he secured a 2-movie deal with Warner Bros. In the same way the 2-part adaptation of it was agreed for with the same company. Overall, he failed to make it a 2-parter due to how large and complex the book was. He had seen the original film where he respected it and Lynch, but chose not to build on any elements from it where he wanted to more show his own images he got from reading the book. He also said that both the previous adaptations did not intimidate him in any way, he just overall wanted to make his own vision of it from the love he had for it. He considered the screenplay to be a coming-of-age story, but also a call of action to the youth. To do so, he wanted to recreate the experience he felt when he first read the book as a teen. He very much focused on the story around Jessica and Paul, where he even gave them a secret hand language they could use to silently communicate with each other. It minimises on many aspects around the Emperor and politics, as he believed the way he portrayed it would still keep the scope of the novel and the exploration of how the power is used, while still also focus on Paul's coming-of-age story. Some characters were even given less prominence, but were established enough so that they could be used more in the future. A major change was for some of the arcs of female characters that were in the book to overall give them more respect and prominence, as he felt that femininity was a crucial theme in the story. Ferguson has even commented on this, saying that he had respect for Frank's original work, but the quality of these female characters were brought up to a new level. A good example of this is Jessica's character, where she is now both a soldier and a member of the council, which is a great compared to her role as a quote-unquote space nun as she was in the original material. The casting process first began by determining who would portray Paul and progressing from there. Denis would then approach actors individually and felt that the final cast was close to what he originally envisioned. For Paul, he wanted someone who was an old soul in a body of a teenager and felt that Timithee was his ideal choice for this, even admitting he had no other alternatives in mind. The actor coincidentally auditioned for a role in Prisoners, which is one of the director's previous films, but didn't get it, where he still had a desire to work with the director. He even travelled down to the Cannes Film Festival to have a personal conversation with him about possibly getting the role. By July 2018, we then entered final negotiations to play the lead, and was attached to the role a few months later. Ferguson would then enter negotiations that September, with Timithee being confirmed for the role by then. Initially, she was hesitant about the role as she felt it was too similar to her previous role in Mission Impossible's franchise, and desired not to be typecast as a strong female character. However, she was convinced after hearing Denis's original vision of the role, and even reading the book. She was then cast by January 2019. The secondary role, casting director Francine Maisler had compiled 30 to 50 audition tapes, each from actors, for Denis to overall look through. Bautista would be offered his role after having a phone call with the director. Overall, he wanted to work with Denis and being a big fan of his, and even wanted to contact him, but was surprised when it was the other way round, and was proud to even be offered a role as soon as that. That moment really made him see how far he'd become as an actor overall. Castings that the director always decided were Skarsgard and Rampling, who accepted her role as she enjoyed his work too. A weird connection as well is that she was originally hired to play Jessica in a previous adaptation. Isaac personally contacted Denis after hearing the film was being in development, where he told him he wanted to star. Later he would then be cast in his role, which he agreed on playing since it suited him physically. Zendaya had to audition for a role as Chani alongside 5 other actresses, since this was prior to her big fame from projects such as Euphoria and even Spider-Man. She was chosen since she was deemed to have the best chemistry with Timithee. Bautista, Skarsgard, Rampling, Isaac and Zendaya officially joined the cast in January 2019. The next month, Bardem, Brolin, Momoa and Dastmalchian were cast. Denis directly called Bardem to offer him his role. Overall, the actor was shocked as he wanted to portray his character. Meanwhile, Brolin had pretended to read the script before accepting, and Momoa said he received a casting call while he was snowboarding, where he would then later contact the director via Skype to confirm his interest. Dastmalchian was also contacted directly through the director, where he was also never even read the script but accepted, since he had confidence in the project after working with him in the past. Henderson joined the cast in March, as Chen was then entering negotiations. It was casting director Maisler who decided to cast Henderson after admiring his work in New York theatre, and when it came to casting Yu, they gathered a list of mostly talented Chinese actors. The studio would then have struggles contacting Chen, to where they eventually contacted his manager in China. Clementine was cast after Maisler enjoyed seeing his performance in the Tiny Desk concerts. It was reported in July 2019 that they were gender swapping the character Keynes by casting Duncan-Brewster. The actress had auditioned for the role in London through Gina J, a fellow and casting director working with Maisler at the time. Later on, they would present a shortlist for potential actors to the role, where Denis would select her. A casting was confirmed in April 2020. Overall, the idea to change the character's gender was originally suggested by Spaihts, where Denis agreed. The set designs were done by production designer Vermite. They stated that the set design for the film was guided by the way they needed to ground the story to help the audience believe in such an extraordinary elements. To do so, he made the sets as realistic and as immersive as possible, using minimal set extensions and no green screens, before creating sets of visual effects. Denis gathered a group of people, including storyboard artist and concept artist Deke Ferrard, to work together to define the visual language of the film. Vermite would create a visual bible to guide the development of the set and to keep it consistent with the visual effects teams. He would then reread the book because he felt that it gives a lot of clues which would help him navigate it into designs, saying that he wanted to support Denis's original vision as a teenager and also to base the design around Herbert's actual book. The early mood boards for the team consisted of a variety of images including architecture from Mesopotamia, Egyptian references, bunkers from World War II, brutalist architecture from Brazil and Soviet Union, megastructures conceived by Super Studio, marble mines, power dams, and glaciers taking over mountains. The design of the Orphantochters were conceived by Denis and storyboard artist Sam Hujitsky. He wanted them to be muscular, resemble a dragonfly and a helicopter, but to also be realistic, including it to obey the laws of nature and gravity. This fits overall in the perception of the world being retro-futuristic. 2 functioning models were created for filming by prop makers in London, where they had operable doors and interior cockpit areas. They weighed over 11 tons and required a cargo plane to transport them to Hungary and Jordan for filming. One was nicknamed the Bucket and had customizable pieces allowing for more space. Cranes were used to make them fly. It was apparently very hard to use them in filming, but was rewarding in seeing them position. Many practical sets were made on the sound stages and backlot of the Origo film studios in Budapest, which served as interiors for the 3 planets. Caladan was made to resemble autumn in Canada, which is Denis's home country. Meanwhile, the interior was inspired by medieval Japanese aesthetics, particularly Paul's training room. The props for the interior were created by set decorator Richard Roberts, which included furniture, lighting, textiles produced in Denmark, and other items to look like antiques. The design for the Samwerns were deemed to be prehistoric, being inspired by whales with baleen in their mouths. Their skin texture was based on tree marks and mud. The design for Arkeem was actually influenced by the book's description on its climate, with Denis calling it the biggest residency ever built by mankind. He designed it in a rock bowl shape to protect its infrastructure from sandworms, and the buildings at an angle to protect them from the high wind speeds. Their walls would be thick as it would make the interiors cooler. The team were overall inspired by World War II bunkers, Mayan temples, and Brazilian modernism. Over 1,000 looks for each planet's people were designed by the team. Costume designs were done by Jacqueline West and Bob Morgan. Denis told West that he wanted the costumes to be grounded in history, while telling them to avoid conventional futuristic views used in other sci-fi films, and put an emphasis on giving a philosophical atmosphere to the film. The designs were primarily inspired by the Middle Ages, and she envisioned how that would look in the future, creating the term modieval to describe her approach to the design of the costumes. They also found similarities between the Freemen and the French Resistance. Additionally, she took inspiration from previous painters including Gatto, Francescan Goya, Caravaggio, and British art historian John Berger. There was also cues from the fashion of Balenciaga. When it came to the Space Guild, she used reference pictures of medieval popes and modernised it when designing their costumes. The sisters' costumes were based on trait cards and chess pieces. Jessica's costumes in the first half of the film were based on the works of Cristobal Balaguer. And again, I'm very sorry if I pronounced that wrong. While the gown she wears while landing on Arrakis was influenced by Middle Eastern clothing and paintings of women in North Africa. She used David Lean films such as Lawrence of Arabia and Dr. Zhivago, along with the film Fahrenheit 451, to further inspire the diversity of costumes. She also researched Roman and Greek mythology, feeling that it connected to both houses and felt that they were similar into the tragedy. A prototype of the still suits were designed by West and Jose Fernandez at Ironhead Studios in LA. Morgan then took the prototype and set up a factory in an aeroplane hangar at Algar Studios, where additional suits were then designed within 2 weeks. He then hired artisans across Europe who would then create concept designs and over 150 individual pieces for them. Over 250 suits were then used when filming in Jordan. They were designed to be flexible and could fit in the actor's body, while also remaining accurate to the book. They also included micro sandwiches which made acrylic fibres and cottons, which absorbed the moisture and allowed the actors to remain cool. Tubing was also run through them too for flexibility. Zippers and buttons were also not used as they deemed to be too erratic. Filming specifically began on March 18, 2019 at Algar Film Studios, with Greg Fraser serving as cinematographer. It was shot for IMAX format with Arri Alexa LF camera and Alexa Mini LF prototype. Finished footage was then transferred to 35mm film stock and was then scanned back to 4K, which was done to make it a more film-like look. Parts of the Iraqi invasion, such as shots of gurney, extras and practical explosions, were shot approximately 5 kilometers high, were filmed on backlots in Budapest. Isaac's final film scene was his character's death, where he did it without clothes on, as he felt it was similar to Christ's crucifixion. Supervisor, stunt coordinator and second unit director Tom Struss focused on developing a unique combat style. When working on the action sequence between Duncan and the soldiers, he based the character's combat style from Greek and Roman warfare techniques and the soldiers from Russian soldiers in the Second World War, saying they wanted to mow him down. The interiors of the ornithopters were then filmed on hilltops outside of Budapest, with a 25-foot high and 360-degree sand-coloured ramp circling a large gimbal, which the team nicknamed a dog collar. This allowed Fraser to film the natural sunlight, which is something Dennis really wanted. Filming also took place in Wade Rum, Jordan, which was used as a double for Arrakis. Prior to filming Arrakis' scenes, Timithee had learned the sandwalker technique beforehand, which was designed by choreographer Benjamin Millepied. Filming occurred in Standalet, Norway, Dublin for Caladan. Filming overall wrapped on July 26, 2019. Additional filming took place in Budapest by August 2020, which did not change the film's December release. Visual effect company DNEG contributed to 28 scenes of the film and created 1,200 VFX shots out of the 1,700 that were in it. Visual effects supervisor Paul Lambert used quote-unquote sand screen for filming Arrakis Arakim scenes. Instead of green screens, he overall used the sand-coloured ones, which matched the establishing desert shots intended for backgrounds. They were also used for scenes on the ornithopter, with them using helicopter footage and replacing them with actual models. This was done to make the sand displacement when it lands and takes off overall easier to capture. The wings for them were also inserted in CGI, even then the same thing was done when it came to filming scenes in Caladan, such as grey screens and ones with a slight blue tint. They used about 18 tons of sand and dust on set, where the team created the effect of blowing it using a V8 engine, with it being on the back of a tractor. Sandworms were created through CGI. Overall, the team found a lot of difficulty in deciding how they would move. This is where they spent over a year looking into different body movements of animals such as worms and snakes. The sand ripples created by the worms were inspired by Jaws, but it came to the sounds of them, Dennis did not want a sound design and to appease if it was made by a studio. This is where sound designers Mark Mangrini and Theo Green used an approach where they captured natural sounds and manipulated them for its use, such as sounds of the shifting sands in Death Valley using hydrophones. Both the Montreal and Vancouver facilities of DNG were used for the Iraqi invasion sequence. This involved both the use of practical and digital effects. The Montreal team created a digital Arkhim spaceport, where the Vancouver team was tasked with simulating explosions. Practical explosions filmed in the Budapest backlot were enhanced by the team. They also added more colour, such as using blue when an object bounced and using red when it penetrated something or someone. The scenes of Paul's future visions were filmed using mocap, and the team replicated it to add hundreds of fighters into it. This was mostly done by animation supervisor Robin Luckman, since the team didn't know much about mocap in general. In addition to the fighters, they also added explosions, sandworms, sand displacement and more simulations to render the scene in real time. To create the desert mouse, their team created a detailed practical stuffy model, and filmed it in Jordan to capture the desert lighting. The animation team then used footage of ideal animals as references. To create the hologram, they projected different parts of the light on Timothee's face during the filming based on his position where using a projector. It was then completed by adding the hologram around him. Practical rigs were then attached to Skarsgard to create the illusion of him actually levitating. with sometimes it actually being done with a seesaw rig, although the suspension device on his back was inserted using CGI. And Zimmer would confirm he'd be scoring the film near the start of its production in March 2019, after working with Denis on Blade Runner. While this, he was actually approached by Christopher Nolan to compose on his upcoming feature film, Tenet, but overall he chose this, citing his personal love for the book as this reason. He overall did not want it to sound like his previous works and used instruments typical of a Western orchestra, which is an approach he called anti-groove. He so avoided watching the original film, so he would not be influenced by that music by Toto. He would even spend a week in a desert in Utah to incorporate its sounds into the score as well. It was performed using an electric set of instruments, including some that were created specifically for the soundtrack. Performers on the score included guitarist Rufam Vigufam and vocalist Laurie Coulter. Some music was also composed by Stephen Mazur and David Fleming, who both worked on it with Sommer to keep his pieces of the theme. For the House of Atreides theme, they used bagpipes. This was an idea from Denis where it sounded something ancient and organic. The composer would then find 30 players around Edinburgh during the COVID pandemic and recorded them playing it in a church. When it came to the first trailer, he would supervise a 32-person choir during FaceTime for the recording of a cover of Pink Floyd's Eclipse. 3 soundtrack albums were released for the film by Water Tower Music, including the Dune sketchbook, Dune original picture soundtrack, and The Art and Soul of Doom, which was respectively released on September 3rd, September 17th, and October 22nd of 2021. The score would then be nominated for Best Soundtrack of Visual Media at the Grammy Awards 2022. Our first look of the film was published in a 2-parter by Vanity Fair on April 14, 2020. Empire's October 2020 issue had a cover story which included an in-depth look into the film along with interviews with cast and crew, which were great new first looks before the trailer's release. A teaser would be released on September 9th. The first 10 minutes of the film would then be screened in select theatres worldwide on July 21st and 22nd, 2021, for an event that would also include a behind-the-scenes look of the film and overall be the debut of its theatrical trailer, which would then release itself on the 22nd. Going back to February 26, 2019, Funcom would go into a partnership with Legendary Entertainment to start developing games related to the films. Then in September 2020, McFarlane Toys started a line of 7-inch figures modelled after the characters, along with a 12-inch figure of Bardem. These were released in December. An art book titled The Art and Soul of Dune was released alongside the film on October 22, 2021. The book was written by executive producer Tanya Laptoin, and it included the soundtrack album composed by Zimmer. It also came in both a standard and deluxe edition. The film was originally scheduled to be released on November 20th, 2020, but then was pushed back to December 18th. It was then even further delayed by COVID-19, this time to October 1st, 2021, which took over the original release slot for The Batman. The film would get pushed back again in late June 2021, this time by 3 weeks to 22nd of October, to overall avoid competition with the film No Time to Die. Like all 2021 films for Warner Bros. That year, this was also streamed simultaneously on HBO Max for its first month. It would then be removed to follow the normal home release schedule. This is something they did for all that year, after doing so with Wonder Woman 1984, at the start of the pandemic. Overall, many production companies and filmmakers did not like this decision, which included Denis and Legendary. The film then had its world premiere at the 78th Venice International Film Festival on September 3rd, 2021. It also had a screening at the Toronto International Film Festival, along with an IMAX premiere at the Ontario Palace Cinetheatre on September 11th. It would then have its London premiere on October 15, 2021, which fun fact Momoa tested positive for after attending. Unfortunately, it was then leaked online ahead of its release on October 17th, but heck, that didn't really stop its success. Then returned for a theatrical run from December 3rd, 2021, but it had screenings from January 24th this year, which included an exclusive preview of Part 2 ahead of its March release. For its home release, it was released digitally on December 3rd, 2021, while disc versions were released on January 11th, 2022 by Warner Bros. Home Entertainment. From reports, it sold a whopping 215,375 units on both Blu-ray and DVDs in its first week, which made them $3.6 million. It was also then the most rented title from Redbox in 3 weeks in a row. made 110 million in US territories in its theatrical run and 324.8 million everywhere else, overall making $434.8 million. It made 41 million in its opening weekend in the US across 4,125 theaters, which surpassed its predicted weekend run of 30 to 35 million and beating Warner Bros. Previous release Godzilla vs. Kong, which made them 31.6 million in its own opening. 17.5 million of the opening came from its first day tickets, including 5.1 from the previous night previews as well. This was overall the best opening for Denis's career as well. It would then make 15.5 million in its second weekend, but remained top of the box office. It then made 7.6 million and then was displaced by the Eternals film in the box office. It then was officially the second film from Warner Bros. To cross 100 million during the pandemic following Godzilla vs. Kong. The film was actually released in 14 countries on September 15, 2021. In this run, it made 37.9 million, with the largest income coming from Russia, which made them 8.9 million, then France, which made them 7.2 million, Germany, who made them 4.4 million, Taiwan, who made them 3.4 million, Italy, who made them 2.5 million, and then Spain, who made them 2.4 million. The film then had an opening of 21.6 million in China, making it rank second of the country's box office, being behind the Battle of Lake Jiangling. The film reached its 300 million mark on November 2nd. In its second run from December 2nd, the film made 1.8 million during the weekend, with earning the 1 million from IMAX screenings alone. The 400 million mark would then be crossed on Valentine's Day of all days in 2022, with the largest running countries outside of the US being China making 39.5 million, France making 32.6 million, the UK making 30 million, Germany making 22.5 million, and Russia making 21.3 million. According to Samba TV, the film was watched over 1.9 million times in the US during its first 3 days of release, then grew to 2.3 million in its full week. It would then grow to 3.9 million by its first month, but according to TV Time, it was the most watched film in the US from its third week of release, before dropping down to 6th place in its 4th week, though it did actually go back to 3rd in its final week of availability. It was overall the 9th most streamed film of 2021. By March 20th, 2022, it was streamed by 5.3 million in the US, which included 996,000 after its Oscar nominations, which were announced on February 8th. After its home release on streaming, it then became second on both iTunes and Vudu charts, while being 7th on Google Play. It would then become 7th for iTunes in its second week, while dropping to 3rd on Vudu and remaining in the same position on Google. It would then become the highest selling title on Redbox's digital service for the week of January 24th to 30th in 2022. It then was also the top ranked film on iTunes in the same week. Following its Academy Award nominations, it re-entered the top 10 charts in iTunes, Google, and Vudu. Critically, it got 83% on Rotten Tomatoes from 507 critics, which gave the average rating of 7.6 out of 10. Metacritic gave it a 74 out of 100 based on 68 critics. Audience-wise, it was given an 84% on Post-Track and with an average rating of 4.5 out of 5, and a 66% of them recommended it to other people. It was an average rating of 3.9 on Letterboxd, though that is from over 1 million reviews. It would then be nominated for 10 Academy Awards where it won 6, 3 Golden Globes where it won 1, 11 British Academy Awards where it won 5, 10 Critics' Choice Awards where it won 3, 2 AACTA International Awards where it won 1, 10 Seattle Awards where it won 5, 1 Grammy which it unfortunately missed out on, 1 Hollywood Music Media Award which it won, 4 People's Choice Awards which it missed out on, 1 Screen Actors Guild which it missed out on, 3 Dorian Awards which it won 1, and 1 Nickelodeon Choice Award which it won. Overall, these awards credited for its direction, score, sound, editing, cinematography, art design, effects, and acting. It was also ranked as one of the top 10 films of 2021 by the American Film Institute. This has got to be one of the best cinema experiences I have had now, along with its second film. Denis really created an awe-inspiring epic movie. Performance-wise, I would have to say this is Timothee's best performance yet. Overall, the casting is so spot on with the names such as Isaac, Brolin, Bardem, etc. However, I can't exactly say many things about Zendaya's performance in this particular film, since well, she only had one proper scene at the end of it. Death is obviously a crucial component in this film and is done very well. I'd say my favourite heroic deaths have to come from the characters Leto and Duncan, and a problem I would say I have with this film is that it would be shortened to maybe around 2 hours, since the first 20 minutes did kind of drag out a bit. However, I can say the rest of the film is so impactful. A small thing I also need to mention is how they knew they didn't need to put too much comedy in this film like other action adventure films. All I can really think of is Duncan and Paul's conversation at the start, where Paul gets more made fun for something like his muscles, but that's more just to show both are friendly. And I'll admit the scene that got me the most was actually the giant spider running away when it got told to go, which really made me chuckle the first time watching it in cinemas. As pretty much every review would say, there's absolutely nothing bad about the cinematography, costumes, and all the audio is pretty much perfect. I'll overall give this film a 4.5 out of 5 or a 9 out of 10. So guys, that is the first out of the 2 videos on Dune, which obviously is such an impactful thing to cinemas, and I'm very grateful for it. I obviously didn't give the perfect rating to this first film just because of its first 20 minutes, to be honest, but overall I still really love it, and I think I've seen it twice in cinemas overall. And yeah, there's nothing really to say other than these are brilliant films, and Denis should be really proud of himself as a filmmaker. Also being very good adaptations. I've not properly read the Dune books, but from what I've seen, they've done a really good job of creating their own vision while still heavily respecting what the books did, while not making them 100% accurate like previous adaptations did by the sounds of it. But yeah, I really want to hear your thoughts, guys, specifically on part 1 for this video. Please comment down below, and maybe some facts I missed out on its overall filmmaking, because geez, there was a lot of info to find here. It was very fun to research and kind of state in this video overall. And also like the video if you did like it, and subscribe if you want to see part 2, and obviously ring that bell. Liking, commenting, and subscribing isn't the main thing to me. I just overall like making these videos, but this video did take like a month to make just overall with my final uni submissions. But yeah, this has been an entertaining video to make, and I can't wait to just start work straight away on the part 2 video. So yeah, I guess I'll see you then.